Yeah. You should be a pro at this. I mean,
Should be. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that green wall behind you.
Thank you.
My favorite color, but I
It's
just have a
newer.
dog behind me.
Well, I see some, you got some color on the side there.
I do, yeah. That's more of like that's blue in all my books, and
Yeah.
so tight squeeze here in my living room. But um, I know it was a quick turnaround for an interview, so I appreciate you taking the time. But
Right. All
I
good.
listened to your first two new podcasts, and I don't know if you remember, but I was actually a guest on the parenting
Of course I
a couple of
do.
years ago.
I
Yeah, you've
totally
done so
remember you.
many.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember you. And also I want to let you know, because I just interviewed a couple weeks ago Gina, and
Oh,
so I read, I mean, I know you're in the new
oh
Fast
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ladies
Fast
famous.
famous.
So
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. So congrats on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Gina's a hoot. Yeah, I've got an essay in each one of those books. So I'm like I'll say yes every time she calls. And I love Laura also. So it's been a nice connection of here, there, and everywhere. So but I listened to the first two podcast of your new series, and very fascinating people,
Mm,
and I mean it's very cool. So but and reading all of your bios and all of the different places and all the things you've done, what I what I find interesting is that in this new podcast, you were really taking people through their narrative, but I don't think anybody knows your narrative because you don't really take
mm,
us up to that what brought you to this place in your life and how you chose. I mean, you give a couple of hints about you've always been able to see potential in things, whether you
mm.
said whether it's landscaping or people or what have you. So I want to know more about that, Dan, and how you got to where you are. So tell me, how did you first know that you see the potential and what did that look like for you growing up?
Mm. So I was always drawn to people, um, relationships. I had what I later learned was intuition, that I could sort of see things unfolding. And I'd be at times looking around. I'm like, does anyone like looking around? Does anyone see what's happening here, or the dynamics in the classroom, or the dynamics on the play yard? Like I just picked up on all of these things, and of course, you always assume that you're like everyone else.
Are you an empath?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah,
yes.
I feel that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I am, and we're not taught that that's a thing, or at least now I think now we're starting to talk about that with people, but especially back in that time, like that wasn't a thing. And so I I then found myself, so I found myself being often the friend who is, I feel like at times over responsible, over anticipating, wanting to make sure that everyone in the group was okay, trying to be, um, in a sense, for better and a lot of times worse, like that glue.
Mhm.
And it's been a process of learning that, just because, what do you do with that information? And even if you want to be helpful, doesn't mean other people want you to be helpful. So um so I had those early, um I guess, abilities, traits, characteristics early on. And then tennis was my passion and my sport, growing up, something that gave me a lot of meaning, and I was really into it. And through there, I started teaching tennis, and then I started, being a counselor at tennis camps and sleepaway tennis camps, and I really enjoyed working with the kids and mentoring the kids. And I remember there was this, at this tennis camp that I went to and then ended up becoming a counselor at, there had this, World Cup type, situation every session where different counselors would pick teams, and all the teams would go against each other. And you got to know the campers when you were giving them all of these, teaching with them and learning. And I did very well on these teams. And I remember the one of the founders said, what Like, how do you do it? And it was one of those things that's like, I just saw what not only the players' talents, but I also like saw who they were as people, and I could tell like who had talent but was lacking the grit, who had the grit, who had the anyway. So I look back early on, and I was just drawn to these situations. Um, the other thing that I think is interesting in hindsight is I was an undiagnosed dyslexic in school. So, well, in life still, right? And dysgraphic. So the handwriting was really hard. The reading was hard. And I just had to figure out other ways to do things. And we know that when some abilities are lower, other abilities get more developed. So when I was in college, I found psychology was just I just understood psychology, most of the classes, and the other classes were harder for me. And so as I started to step into now, what am I going to do? I remember having this thought around college time, especially during some of the academic, I think, frustrations and struggles and having to think about what I was going to be. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I want to have this job where I get paid to be who I am. I just remember this like so strong thinking like, yeah, what's that? Like
What stage of the game is this? Are you this while you're in
this,
college?
this is like college. This is like
College,
college.
okay.
The other thing that was happening at the time is well, Frasier was on, right? Frasier was on Cheers. I forget when Frasier actually started, but I was a big fan of Frasier. And I would listen to in Southern California where I grew up, there was a lot of talk shows that I'd hear with like psychologists, and whether it was, I don't know, Dr. Ruth and all these other folks. And I was like, God, I would love to do that someday. So I think these things were just happening. And and so I found psychology. A college counselor who I had worked with said, you know, did you ever think about being a psychologist? And I'm like, I didn't know. No, I don't even know like how to do that.
Right.
And through that guidance, I started on this path, and it took hold of me. And I'll stop right there because there's more to it up to here, but
That's
I'm
fine. Yeah, there's I've got questions because as
yeah.
someone who can see the potential in people, especially at a young age and growing up, I guess there's two thoughts I have here. First is that comes with a lot of disappointment sometimes. And is that something that you had to really counter within yourself, that what the potential you saw versus someone's inability or unwillingness to meet it?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I do feel so the short answer, I think interpersonally was yes.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when I in relationship,
Mhm.
when I would I and I think I was very idealistic. Um, and when I could see what could be, and either the person or the relationship would not match that, yeah, there was a lot of disappointment because I found myself really investing in those relationships, in those people. And and again, what I've learned later is that doesn't mean that those people necessarily wanted that level of investment or saw the same things in themselves. But yes, I think that's also another part of my being a perfectionist in recovery, which is definitely part of my package, is seeing like what could be at like these and having these high standards like for self and at times for I don't know if it's the high standards for others, but high standards for what I seek is possible. Um, yeah, it often falls short. Like you know, like when we have this vision, I don't know what percent of the time the vision actually comes to reality to the way that you actually want it. So it's definitely something that I've had to and continue to have to reconcile with.
Yeah, it relies on more than just you, which I think is something we all have to contend with when we're trying to forge our own path, and we have this vision or we have this potential that we see in ourselves or others. It requires more than just you, and I think that's really hard. As someone who I think, and I've never been formally diagnosed, I've been through lots of therapy, but I've never been diagnosed with, but I'm pretty sure I'm an ADD, ADHD person.
Mm.
Um, And the most dreaded thing I ever heard in school, and I wonder with your dyslexia and if this ever happened to you, was uh, the constant thing that they would tell my parents that I'm not living up to my potential. And I just do not thrive in a traditional classroom setting.
Yeah.
And to me, that broke my spirit a little bit because every year I would start off, this is gonna be a great year, and then like I would inevitably blow it. Um, is that
Hmm.
something that you heard as a kid that or was you're a bright person, but you're not living up to your somehow potential? Was that forced on you?
Yes, it was. So it went something like my version was this. It was confusion by the teachers. It was we would like you to take. We believe you have the ability to be in this advanced class, so we'd like to you to take the test. Um, and I never progressed beyond the test. Um, all my friends were in those classes, so I just felt I wasn't as smart as they were. But then, as you get older, you usually surround yourself with people that have a lot of similar characteristics. So, um, yeah, so it was a lot of we're not sure why. This is interesting to us. You're able to talk about these topics at this level, but your writing is at this
Sorry.
level, right? So it was that discrepancy that was always there. And then at times, yeah, you start to question yourself. And then for me, I just never felt I didn't feel smart as
Yeah.
my peers and the people who I think thought that I was smarter than I was
Yeah.
um, presenting with.
How did that experience inform your work at the Summit Center?
Hmm. Um, I get, compassion, compassion and empathy. And I think this is where everything started to come together with this, how to take the possibility and the potential and use it in a professional capacity because I naturally was drawn I was naturally pushing back against the stigmatizing pathology based model of psychiatry handed down excuse me psychology handed down by psychiatry created in pathology in the medical community, which makes a lot of sense when you're dealing with body parts and you're dealing with different functions that you need to find out what's wrong and then you need to treat it. I think it's gotten complicated along the way when we're talking about people that way. And so I think having that experience of struggle, at times feeling misunderstood, not even understanding myself, and seeing the potential in people, it was all to me about, particularly in the testing aspects of the work, which we do a lot at Summit Center, in addition to therapy and consultation and coaching, was about how are we going to explain you to your parents, to the teacher, so you have an understanding of who you are, so you can be successful, so you can feel smart, so you can understand what your strengths and talents are. And yes, and we can identify where the weaknesses are, where the labels are, because they do have a purpose when used correctly. So you can understand yourself in a way where you can be good at stuff, be less good at stuff, but you feel good about yourself as opposed to feeling bad and stupid.
Yeah. And so much of that is if you're ever going to reach your potential, it's an inside job. You got to start there. And
Yeah.
that's hard. And I think that's really hard. And I've gone back and forth like, should I be like, as an adult who functions, but I definitely see where I get lost. I often wonder if that would ever benefit me to actually, hey, maybe I should have this looked at. Um, it's a back and forth. But yeah, I think every child who has not thrived in a traditional school setting for whatever reason contends with that not being smart feeling along the way.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's interesting to me that just the small, I've only listened to the first two, but this new podcast so far, these two individuals definitely celebrate what living to your fullest potential. They exemplify that in
Yeah.
big ways. in big ways.
Hmm.
Is that intentional, or is that, am I just seeing a through line here that's not, that am I off base?
No, you're right on. I mean, it was my vision. And as you know, I think I mentioned it on the first, I did mention on the first podcast, like John Graham reached out to me just as I had visioned the new show and we were just starting to put all the pieces together. And he gives me this, LinkedIn, hey, I would love to come on your show, which I think he might have been referring to the former podcast, and tell my story. And I was like, wow. And then when I learned about his life and read his memoir, I was like, this is spot on. This is a person who is has lived a long time, 80 plus years, and has lived multiple lifetimes within. And his life is about searching for meaning and helping people find their purpose. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. And then through that, I learned about his wife. And then I was going to ask him if he could introduce me. And he said on his own, you have to
Mhm.
interview Anne. So I
Right.
just feel so fortunate. So I don't know. I think whether everything lined up and the universe is conspiring with
Yeah.
me, it was exactly the image that I had for the conversations that I do want to have on this new podcast.
Why did you decide to pivot towards that and away from the parents' footprint?
Hmm. Over time, I was feeling so the podcast I think was 7-ish to 8 years. I think it coincided also with my own development as these things sort of do. I mean, my kids now are all about to turn 25, 23, 21. And so that's just like the personal side of things where I was in my parenting journey. But what happened in the show is it evolved over time. I found myself evolving over time where the show was very, as you know, as being a former guest, is really about awareness and people having their own awareness in order to live fulfilling, purposeful lives so their kids can too. See that as a model. And right, healthy adults raise healthy kids. And so I kept feeling kind of I was kept pushing the box open because I was just more and more interested to people's self-awareness, people's growth, and yes, of course, raising healthy kids, but I found myself going more and more towards that topic. And it just came to a point that I felt it was just time to open it up and it not be based in the parenting space, but of course, still could be covering parenting. So I just felt I need to go there. I just felt called to go there.
Yeah. It seems like it's funny because I just kind of shifted my own column towards I call it holding space for good is the name of my column now because
Nice.
I feel like um kind of I think commentary out there right now is so reactionary that we're forgetting our potential and the good
Yeah.
things that people are doing. And so I really wanted to intentionally carve out a space for good. And
I love that, Bonnie.
yeah.
I love that.
So this was very serendipitous because I was like, and so I'm about 2 months into this shift myself. And I left corporate journalism. I quit my editor's job.
Mm,
I found it soul crushing and really felt like in the opinion space of the newspapers of like hate does not need my help and
mm,
ranting and finger wagging is not getting us anywhere.
mhm.
So yeah, so I really it really speaks to me. And I'm a social science junkie. I'm like, Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, Adam Grant, like I've read and listened to all the things, right?
They're all on that bookshelf right there. I love it. Yeah.
And I even love Trevor Noah's new podcast. That's a really good podcast. So I listen to these guys, I read these people, and I love it. And now, like, Mel Robbins seems to be everywhere with the let them theory. And I'm
Yeah.
like, every time I go on a podcast, I'm like, Lord have mercy if she's on one more place. I'm like, I've heard it already. But and I mean, no, not disparaging to her, but she's working it. I feel like the world is really and our our American society, at least I hope, is really primed for this
Hmm.
collective growth. Do you feel the
Yes.
same way, or do you feel like you're diving into this competitive space that's going to be really hard for you?
Those are good questions. I'm thinking about both of them at once because so I
It's hard. Sorry, those
yeah,
those.
no, I like
Yeah.
they overlap. So first one first. I do feel there is so much tension, polarity, um, conflict, but with that, all of this energy, where people really care about what they care about. And people are really scared and have a lot of fear about all the things that they're scared and fearful about. So I completely agree with you that we're at a time for opportunity. And something that I took away from the election was, and this was all when all of this was happening in launching, was how much we need to lean in, like how much we actually need to lean in, where our tendency is to like pull away and to put these people in this box and these people in this box. Like we have to lean in and like, as they say, like be the change. Like we have to be it. So I really felt compelled, um, even stronger with this message. And when you think about the space, I do think we're seeing trends. I think we're seeing lots of trends over time about living authentically, um, you know, trying to express our true selves, what we're here to be, potential, possibility, um, purpose. I mean, there is a change going on, right? Because there are more and more people talking about this. And so I I don't think in terms of competition. And I just think how my brain works. It doesn't mean I don't understand competition. And sometimes I don't feel a little bit intimidated or I question. Um, I have decided to continue to go in the direction that I am being pulled. And I believe there is plenty to go around for everyone.
Right.
Um, Especially in this space. Like you can't have enough people talking about what we are talking about now. And I feel like there are so many people who want it and they want to feel hope. And this is what it reminds me of. So another part of this where this new show came from. So lockdown, I'm on a run during lockdown, whatever, March 2019. And and that's where I usually get my downloads and I kind of like get my ideas and my
Oh
creativity.
yeah. Mhm.
And I heard, like, I got a download, I got a message that said something like, you are to bring hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom. And then I had this little a request from our community to start doing Facebook Lives when everyone was feeling so scared and alone. And I started doing that for a little bit. I don't know how long I did that. That message has stayed with me. And if since you listen to the podcast, you could hear that in the beginning of the intro. And so that's where I feel people need hope and people need to feel connected. And I think this work that we are engaging in is a way to do that.
Yeah. Man, I feel there's just so many overlaps. I feel very serendipitous. So yeah. I did a lot of YouTube interviews during COVID, the lockdown,
Mhm.
for very much the same reason. And my download was to tie personal experience to current events to help the reader empathize, relate, and care.
Mhm.
So that was it's like, and
Yeah.
that's my dogma. It's like so it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me, and for me it's hard. And I guess this is the part where I'm getting ready to turn 50. So I'm
Mhm.
listening to the podcast today. I was like, yeah, I'm maybe I'm right at that don't give a shit anymore age that I need to be, because I feel like when we talk about these things, especially in terms of purpose and in terms of potential and all of those number one, I'm very aware of my privilege in that space.
Mhm.
And it can be abrasive to those who are struggling to the point of sounding wooey and to the point of, well, just I'm a white privileged middle-aged lady. And
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of that. Um,
Hmm.
are you? Do you have that? Do that have that in your brain too as you fulfill
Yeah.
your purpose?
Yes. Yes. And I'm a white privileged male,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I do think about it and I try to hold space for it. And I'm open to any feedback that people like, if there's any like a blind spot or a Pollyannish way, like I am always open. Like I do need that that feedback
Yeah.
to hear that. And I do believe in people's ability to transform and transcend in all of the different situations that people are in, holding that a lot of people have really awful tough circumstances and don't have the same sort of opportunities. Um, and again, that's where I just see the potential because I see if people can make like 5% improvement on something they want to do, 1% improvement, like take a step, it looks different for everyone what that is. But I firmly believe everyone can go in a direction that um, where they're being like what they want for themselves, whether it comes from an internal, something, or it's something external that they want. I think we have so much potential within us, and there are so many with incredibly difficult circumstances. So yeah, it's trying to hold all of that. That's a
Yeah.
great point.
I think that also you made a point in when you were talking to Anne about our programming, and I also and stripping away and dealing with our societal programming, but I also think when we talk about privilege and privileged spaces, we sometimes negate the fact that success isn't quantified by dollars in our capitalist society.
Right.
So the stories that we tell and the people that we find who are living their incredible purpose and reaching their potential are sometimes impoverished, but they're boots on the ground doing incredible work for their neighborhoods and their communities. And so I think it's important that
Absolutely.
that and one of the ways that we can step outside of our privilege is to remind readers and viewers that it's not it's not a capitalist view of success.
I totally agree. So when I think of success or growth,
Yeah.
it's funny, is like because now you're making me think, what am I actually talking about? Is I'm thinking of like self-actualization. I'm thinking like, what were you here to do? What were you here to be? Where are you here to live? Like it's all of those, and it's not about, and you will have X amount of dollars in your bank account and own this, because we know that people who have all that, I mean, some of them are very fulfilled, but a lot of them are not. It's like this, that's not the end game.
Yeah. I mean, we have a not to get political, but I mean, Elon Musk, I'm like, you're the richest man in the world. I'm like, how, what, at this point, what does another $1 million actually mean to you? Like when you could solve world hunger if you wanted to. I think, there's a lot of wealthy people chasing the wrong thing. Um, anyway, that's my little
Yeah.
rant. But there's one more thing I wanted to bring up that like it occurred to me and since you're a psychologist, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. And I guess we can think individually and we can also think collectively. I think of cognitive behavioral therapy when they talk about like how setbacks are part of an expected part of every person's journey.
Hmm.
And I wonder I don't know. I go back and forth in my head with our country. Are we a pendulum swing, or are we just spiraling down into a setback before we really propel forward as a culture? And I
Mm,
don't know how we encourage people through
right.
these good stories and conversations. Is that possible? Or am I just fooling myself? I don't know. I don't even know if I'm making any sense, but I'm like, good grief, are we back here again? Is this just the setback that we need to double down and move truly forward?
That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
That is where I'm going with this. And that's also how that helps me with the fear. It helps me with the concern for people, for humanity, for the collective. And I we have a lot of information in a lot of different places, whether the historians are telling us about the cycles of civilizations.
Yeah.
We know from just our own history of America. And of course, there's a lot of people who are talking about astrology and the stars and how this is everyone is saying like this was
This
none of
is
this
it.
is this is none of this is a surprise. And so I do believe the tension is needed for real change. And that's the hard part. Just like we know you alluded to like our own personal journeys, we don't learn from getting awards and achieving milestones. They feel really good, but what we learn from is our darkest, toughest moments, like hands down. And and when I think back of like my darkest, toughest moment, I would say would be in my mid to late 20s. Um, and when I say moment, I wish it was just a moment, but you're like period of time. I describe it as the worst experience I never want to have again that I am so grateful for having. Like I wouldn't have grown in the ways that I needed to grow and expand if I did not end up in that dark space. And
What
I've
was it? Are you able to share? And you don't have to,
Oh
but
yeah, I mean, it was depression. It was depression and anxiety. I'm more wired for anxiety and worry and the perfectionism and the obsessiveness. And so it was towards the end of towards the end of grad school, and there was a lot of stuff happening in the grad school that was impacting me, and there was stuff that was happening in my personal life that was impacting me. And my journey into this was all of a sudden I'm not sleeping and I'm spinning and I'm anxious and at a level that I had not experienced. And then if you stay in that state for a lot of people for too long, the neurotransmitters just get completely worn down and just burnt out, and then you can fall into a depression. And
in
so
your
for
education, you knew exactly what was going on at
well,
the
like at
time
an
it was
intellectual
happening.
level, but at a personal level,
Right.
you
Yeah.
still are just trying to figure it out and survive. So it's a yes and a no. And what I've learned in my work, but also through my experience, is depression and anxiety are like two different sides of the same coin, and different people lead with a different one. And so, I was in a very vulnerable and scary place, and the world didn't make sense, and I didn't make sense. I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't fall back on my achievement-oriented, perfectionistic things just to push me forward and have everyone think that I'm so good at whatever I'm doing. And it was like the pieces were just apart. And the toughest call I ever made was calling a psychologist. I mean, here I am at the end of graduate school in psychology, wanting to spend a career doing it. The toughest call was doing that. And I'll take it even a step further because I really appreciate people who do tell stories and reduce the stigma. The next toughest thing was, and I got lucky with the psychologist. I looked in the phone book back in the day, who's close to me,
Oh
and
wow.
I
Yeah.
just boom,
Yeah.
I got really lucky. This great man that I worked with, and then there was a time when he's like, Dan, I really think you'd benefit from medicine, some medication. Like, no, 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 right? Like it's hard enough that I'm in therapy. Like I'm giving up enough control that I can't do this myself, that I'm in therapy. Like medicine, no. And he just kept gently saying, well, what are you recommending your clients that you are working with in these situations? And I'm like, medicine, yeah, but I'm different. So, but finally doing that was the thing I needed for my life, for my work. I needed to experience all of this for the like amazing empathy and compassion. And it was the medicine. And then I got to learn the experience of it not working and trying a different one and side effects and all the stuff that those of us who are in the position of recommending it need to understand this really clearly if you're going to recommend something that you actually know what you're. Anyway, so at the end of the day, the medicine was helping me turn the corner. And then I was fortunate to, once I did, not to need it anymore. Um, but it was so back to, I couldn't have, I'm not who I am without that. I
Mhm.
think we are still, as a society and a humanity, becoming, is my belief. And it's going to be messy. But you and I, we have to do this work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we got to get to the kids because, man, if we can help stop some of the trauma before it starts,
Yeah.
Lord, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be great. But yeah, that's yeah. What keeps you grounded?
Mm,
I get caught up in the goodness and I get caught up, and sometimes I get caught up in the external worth. I have a lot of self-worth issues that I work through just from my own
yeah.
baggage. And for me, I get enough hate mail that I have to remember to, I'll put more weight in that than I will into the Atta girls. And so I have to ground
Yeah.
myself and get my ego out of it. And I'll remind
Yeah.
myself of that. And my silly way of doing that is, Bonnie, in a billion years when the sun explodes, your column is not going to be on the spaceship that takes humanity
Yeah.
out of here. So just do your job.
I like that. That's a really good coping mechanism. And I really admire people like you who put yourself out there to get that more regular feedback. And I know it can be negative. I'm still working on that. It's the tough skin thing, like to just try to take things with a grain of salt. And I think again, that's part of this whole process is knowing like everyone's got their place, their reason, and it's like it's not personal, and it shouldn't stop us from being who we are or what we want to do. But
Yeah.
yes, it's hard. Okay, so for groundedness, few things. Running is really important to me. I do it for the like psychological, spiritual, emotional aspects, almost even probably more than the physical. I mean, it's just something that I need to do. Nature um, is a grounding place for me. It's dumping rain now, but when it's not, we have open space near us that we can go hike and run in. That's really important. My wife is a tremendous grounding source for me. I feel very fortunate. And friendship, right? It's not about quantity for friendship. It's like it's quality, and it's having a person or two that you can relate to and be yourself and share with. And so, um, and meditation, and that having a regular habit of meditation is, I have found going within is really helpful to just let everything else be out there whenever I need to.
What do you hope that the people who find your podcast, instead of being intimidated by all these people doing incredible things and saving people out in the middle of the ocean and all of those things,
Right, right.
what do
Yeah,
you hope
yeah.
to inspire, or what do you hope the takeaway is when they walk away and come back and listen to this?
Well, the first thing is hope. The first thing truly is that they feel hope, that they can continue to become and continue to go in the direction that they feel that inner calling, and that they can listen to and find their purpose, what they're here to do. And it doesn't mean they have to do it for a job. You can do it 1 hour a week. You can do it on the weekends. It's like, it's really getting in touch with what drives you, what motivates you, and permission to step into it. And I think, again, these first two guests, as you point out, are these phenomenal people who have lived 82 and almost 92 years. And what's remarkable about that, and one of the main messages was for John, like his life really started to change at 40. And Anne, it was at 50. And they've had a whole lifetime. So it's never too late. Like, I think this is the thing. People are like, it's too late. It is never too late to listen to your calling and step in the direction that you're being pulled.
Right. That's right. First half of my life was just fodder. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
It's
All
just,
grist for the mill. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. Is there anything else you want to tell me before we sign off that you think I should know about your journey or this podcast?
Hmm. I just want people to think about all the possibilities. Just think about all the possibilities because when we're in our darkest times, um, we feel trapped and we feel this is it and this is what it is and it's not ever going to change. And from my own experience, looking back in hindsight, all of the things that happened that seem like really positive big things that ended up being aligned with my direction, I didn't see them coming. Like it's not about your will, it's not about willfully making something happen, although having that perseverance is really important. But just know there are so many possibilities beyond what you can even think about or imagine that are out there, and to try to just stay open to possibility because the universe has a way of presenting us with things.
That's awesome. Very well said. Awesome. Thank you. I'm very glad to meet you and know you, and I hope our paths cross again.
Thanks, Bonnie. Me
Yep.
too.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you.
Bye.
Bye.